Hello? Is anyone out there? Get me out of here! The voice, thin and laced with a panic that was poorly disguised by arrogance, crackled through the emergency intercom. It echoed down the pitch-black corridor of the 58th floor, slicing through the oppressive silence. Cole Walsh, halfway through polishing the marble expanse, let the handle of the industrial buffer drop from his hands. It rocked silently on its wheels. Even distorted by the cheap speaker, he recognized the voice. Preston Beaumont. "Please help me! I'm trapped in here!" Cole crossed to the wall panel, its small red light the only point of reference in the darkness. He pressed the talk button, his movements sure and steady. He knew this floor better than his own apartment. "This is Cole Walsh with facilities, Mr. Beaumont. Where are you?" "Where do you think I am, you imbecile? I'm on the top floor, in the vault." The voice was sharp, grating. "The power's out. The door is sealed. The override isn't responding. Do you have any idea who I am? Get me out." Cole let out a slow breath, a citywide blackout. He'd felt the building's life support systems die just moments before. The hum of the air conditioners, the whisper of 1,000 computers, the faint thrum of the elevators. All gone. His first thought, a sharp pang of worry, was for his daughter Mia. He hoped the blackout hadn't scared her. Then the second thought, the one that paid the bills, took over. "The primary and secondary generators must have failed to engage, sir. The entire grid is likely down." "I don't care about the grid. I care about this door," Preston shrieked. "Are you coming to get me, or are you just going to stand there narrating the apocalypse?" The line clicked dead. Cole stood in the dark for a moment, the silence rushing back in. The Founder's Vault. Of course. Orrin Beaumont's final, perfect creation, a shrine to himself on the 60th floor that his son, Preston, used for dramatic conference calls and storing vintage scotch. It was encased in a security system so advanced it was rumored to be able to withstand a bomb blast. And now it's a very expensive panic room, Cole muttered to himself. He felt his way along the wall to the janitorial closet, his fingers finding his heavy-duty flashlight. He flicked it on, its powerful beam cutting a reassuring path through the shadows. He clipped a multi-tool to his belt and, after a moment's hesitation, pulled a rolled-up set of schematics from his locker. He'd studied them for fun years ago, fascinated by the building's hidden arteries. It was the engineer in him that never died, the one he'd had to bury under tuition bills he couldn't pay and the sudden gutting reality of single fatherhood. The emergency stairs were his only option. He took them 2 at a time, a grim rhythm of purpose, his flashlight beam dancing off the cold concrete. The silence was unnerving. He was the sole guardian of this silent glass giant. As he climbed, his mind worked the problem. The magnetic locks on the vault were fail-secure. Without power, they were sealed tight. The manual override was purely mechanical, a complex series of tumblers and pressure plates located in a service duct behind the main office, a duct no one had likely entered in a decade. He reached the 60th floor, the air thin and cold. The executive lobby was a cavern of shadows, filled with priceless art he usually had to dust. He ignored the massive, impenetrable vault door and headed for a large, abstract painting he knew concealed a maintenance panel. He swung the painting aside, the hinges groaning in protest. Behind it, a steel plate with a simple keyhole. His master key, the one that opened every non-essential door in the building, slid in and turned with a satisfying thud. The panel opened onto a narrow, dark space thick with the smell of dust and old wiring. This was the building's guts. He squeezed inside, the beam of his flashlight revealing a tight corridor, a relic from the original construction. This path, known to only a handful of original engineers, and one very curious janitor, led directly behind the vault. As he shuffled down the cramped passage, his light caught an irregularity on the floor. A steel plate, meant to be flush with the concrete, was slightly askew. He nudged it with the toe of his boot. It shifted easily, revealing a small, dark cavity beneath. He knelt, shining his light into the hole. There, nestled on a bed of old gray insulation, was a book. It was bound in dark leather, its cover worn smooth with time. There was no title, just 2 initials embossed in faded gold leaf. O.B. Orrin Beaumont. Cole's breath caught. This must have been his hiding place, a secret spot even his own son didn't know about. There was no time to ponder it. He couldn't leave it there, forgotten in the dark. With a sense of reverence he couldn't explain, Cole tucked the book inside his jacket and continued on. The safety of the man in the vault, no matter how insufferable, came first. He finally reached the override panel at the end of the duct. It was a complex web of levers and dials that looked more like the controls of a submarine than a door lock. Taped above it was a single sheet of paper, yellowed and brittle with age. The typewritten words were stark. Warning: manual override engages a counterbalance system. Incorrect sequence will trigger a permanent lockdown. Sequence must be completed within 90 seconds of initiation. He heard a frantic banging from the other side of the thick vault wall. "What's taking so long out there? I'll have your job for this." Cole ignored him, his entire focus on the panel. 90 seconds, one wrong move, and he'd turned Preston Beaumont's gilded cage into a steel tomb. He shone his light across the dusty dials, took a deep, steadying breath, and placed his hand on the first lever. The 90-second warning wasn't a suggestion. It was a promise of total, irreversible failure. Cole pushed the thought from his mind, his focus narrowing to the complex array of dusty dials and levers before him. He pulled the first heavy lever down. A low groan echoed from deep within the wall, and a single green light flickered to life on the panel. The countdown had begun. His hands moved with a certainty that surprised even himself. It was a language he understood, the logic of mechanics, of cause and effect. Turn the first dial 3 clicks to the right. He felt the tumblers align with a soft snick. Pull the second lever halfway. A pressure plate engaged with a hiss of air. He was a conductor leading an orchestra of steel and gears. "What is that noise?" Preston's voice was a muffled shout from inside. "Are you breaking it? I swear, if you scratch the titanium finish..." Cole blocked him out. 70 seconds left. The schematics had shown him the sequence, but the paper couldn't convey the feel of it. The slight resistance in the third dial told him the lubrication had dried out. He compensated, applying steady, even pressure until it clicked into place. A second green light joined the first. 60 seconds. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the methodical work of his hands. He had to move faster. A heavy release valve, a series of 3 small color-coded knobs that had to be turned in a precise order: red, yellow, blue. His fingers, usually calloused from pushing a mop, were nimble and sure. Red, a quarter turn. Yellow, a half. Blue, a full turn back. The wall vibrated. "It's shaking in here. What are you doing?" 30 seconds. Only the final sequence remained. 2 large interlocking wheels that had to be turned in opposite directions, simultaneously. He gripped them, his palms sweating. He took a breath, the image of Mia's face, her gap-toothed grin at her last school picture, flashing in his mind. He had to get this right. He had to get home to her. He turned. The gears ground against each other, the sound of metal screaming in protest. For a horrifying second, he thought they were seized. He put his shoulder into it, pouring every ounce of his strength into the motion. With a final, deafening shudder that shook the whole corridor, the wheels completed their rotation. A loud, definitive clang echoed through the duct, and all 3 green lights on the panel glowed a steady, solid green. Silence. Then, from the other side of the duct, came the sound of pressurized air releasing and the whisper of a heavy door sliding open. He'd done it. Cole leaned against the wall of the service duct, his legs trembling with adrenaline. He wiped a sleeve across his forehead, leaving a streak of grease and grime. He made his way back through the narrow passage and stepped out from behind the painting into the cavernous executive lobby just as Preston Beaumont stumbled out of the vault. Preston wasn't relieved. He was furious. His $1,000 suit was rumpled, his perfect hair was askew, and his face was pale with rage. "There you are," he spat, pointing a trembling finger at Cole. "Do you have any idea the kind of liability you've just exposed this company to? First the power, then trapping me in there for ages." "Sir, the entire city is without power," Cole said, his voice level. "I got here as fast as I could. Your job is to make sure this doesn't happen." Preston advanced on him, his voice rising. "My mother will hear about this. You'll be lucky if you're cleaning toilets in a bus station by morning. You're fired." Just as Preston puffed out his chest, the heavy doors to the emergency stairwell burst open. 2 burly security guards in dark suits rushed in, followed by a woman whose presence seemed to suck all the energy from Preston's tantrum. Meredith Beaumont was a study in controlled power. Her tailored dress was immaculate, her expression sharp and analytical. She took in the scene with a single, sweeping glance. Her hysterical son, the open vault, and the calm, grease-stained janitor standing his ground. Her eyes, a cool, intelligent gray, bypassed her son completely and settled on Cole. "Report," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air with absolute authority. Preston's mouth snapped shut. "Citywide power failure, ma'am," Cole answered, straightening up. "Looks like a cascading overload took out the primary and backup generators. The vault's internal battery was fried in the surge. I initiated the mechanical override from the service duct." Preston scoffed. He was probably fiddling with something he wasn't supposed to. He's just the janitor. Meredith didn't even look at her son. "The mechanical override sequence is known by only 3 senior engineers, all of whom are unreachable right now," she stated, her gaze unwavering on Cole. "How did you know how to do it?" "I studied the original schematics, ma'am, the ones your late husband drew up. I found them in the building archive." For the first time, a flicker of something unreadable crossed Meredith's face. Interest. She took a step closer. "And the service duct? How did you know about the access panel behind the painting?" "It was on the schematics, too," Cole said simply. "A direct path. Seemed faster than trying to drill through the door." The corner of Meredith's mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. "Faster, yes." She looked him up and down, her eyes missing nothing, from the grime on his hands to the exhaustion in his posture. As he recounted his path through the duct, he remembered the book. "Ma'am, I also found something," he said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out the worn, leather-bound journal. "It was in a loose floor compartment in the service corridor, behind your husband's old office. I thought you should have it." He held it out. The moment Meredith saw the faded gold initials, her composure shattered. It was just for a second, but it was as if the ground had shifted beneath her. The cool, commanding CEO vanished, replaced by a woman seeing a ghost. Her hand trembled slightly as she took the book, her fingers tracing the letters OB as if she couldn't believe they were real. She clutched the journal to her chest, a lifeline. The entire world, her frantic son, the security detail, the 60 floors of darkness below them, seemed to fade away. Her sharp, analytical gaze softened as she looked up at Cole, but it held a new, startling intensity. She wasn't looking at a janitor anymore. She was looking at the man who had just handed her back a piece of her own heart. "Mr. Walsh," she said, her voice low and firm, pulling him into a new, unfamiliar orbit. "Don't go anywhere. I want to talk to you." The air in the lobby was thick with unspoken words. Preston shot Cole a look of pure venom, his humiliation curdling into resentment. Meredith, however, seemed oblivious. She clutched the leather-bound journal as if it were the most precious object in the world. "Kieran," she said to her head of security, a tall man with a quiet, watchful presence, "escort my son downstairs. Find him some water and a quiet place to sit until the power is restored." "Mother, I'm not a child." Preston started to protest, his voice thin and petulant. "No," Meredith agreed, her voice dropping to a level that was both soft and unbreakable. "You're not, which is why you'll do as I say without making a scene." She didn't raise her voice, but the dismissal was absolute. Preston's face flushed, but he knew that tone. He turned on his heel and stomped towards the stairwell, the security guards flanking him like wardens. The heavy fire door slammed shut, leaving Meredith and Cole alone in the vast, dark space, the beams of their flashlights cutting lonely paths through the gloom. Meredith finally let out a breath she seemed to have been holding since she saw the journal. "My office," she said, her composure returning, but softened now, less armor and more weary grace. She led him not to the main entrance, but to a discreet side door he'd never seen used. It opened into a space that was both minimalist and warm. Even in the shifting flashlight beams, he could see the clean lines of the furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows showing the blacked-out city, and on the wall, a single, beautifully framed photo of Meredith and a handsome, smiling man standing together on a construction site, laughing. Orrin Beaumont. She placed her flashlight on the edge of her massive desk, pointing it toward the ceiling. It cast a soft, indirect glow, creating a small island of intimacy in the dark. "Tell me again, Mr. Walsh," she said, her voice softer now. "Exactly where did you find this?" "In a service duct. There was a loose floor panel behind the wall of what must have been your husband's private study, next to the vault." She nodded, running a hand over the book's worn cover. He called it his thinking space. He had compartments like that in every office he ever designed. A sad smile touched her lips. "I thought this was lost. We had a fire at our home years ago. It destroyed his study, his library, all of his private journals. I thought they were all ash." She looked up at him, and her gray eyes were searching. "You knew the schematics? You understood them." Cole felt a flush of embarrassment. He was a janitor. "I started an engineering degree a long time ago," he admitted quietly. "At City College. Life got in the way. I guess I never lost the habit of wanting to know how things are put together." "Life gets in the way," she repeated, the words resonating in the quiet room. She opened the journal, her fingers deft and familiar, as if she'd opened it 1,000 times before. She stopped on a page filled with elegant, dense handwriting and a detailed, beautiful sketch of what looked like a self-sustaining community. "This was his last dream," Meredith said, her voice thick with emotion. "The Etheria Project. A low-income, high-efficiency housing community. He wanted to build a neighborhood that gave dignity and beauty to people who were always told they didn't deserve it." She looked from the page to Cole. "Mr. Walsh, Cole, this journal coming back to me, through you, at this moment, it feels like a sign." She stood and walked around the desk until she was standing in front of him. "I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a position, a new one. Special Projects Coordinator for the Beaumont Foundation. You'd report directly to me." Cole's mind went blank. He could hear the words, but they didn't make sense. She wasn't finished. "The foundation will also provide a full scholarship for you to complete your engineering degree at any university you choose." He stared at her, speechless. He thought of Mia, of the constant worry about rent, of the ache in his back after a long shift. "Why?" he managed to choke out. "Because," she said, tapping the journal, "this project needs a guardian. Someone with engineering talent who understands what it means to struggle. Someone who sees a problem and fixes it." She looked him straight in the eye. "I need you to help me finish what my husband started." He shook his head, taking a step back. "Ma'am, Meredith, I can't. I'm not qualified. I'm a janitor. You are the man who saved my son, understood my husband's designs, and returned a piece of his soul to me," she said, her certainty absolute. "That makes you more qualified than anyone." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. On the back, she wrote a phone number with a silver pen. Her private line. She pressed it into his hand. His fingers, stained with grease, felt clumsy and huge holding the delicate card. "Go home to your daughter, Cole," she said, her voice softening again. "The city is dark, but the sun will rise. When it does, your life can be different. We'll talk tomorrow." He could only nod, his throat too tight to speak. He turned and walked out of her office, the business card feeling like it weighed 100 pounds in his palm, a key to a world he never knew existed. The 60-floor journey down was an eternity in a different kind of darkness. Before, it had been a race against time. Now it was a slow descent through the wreckage of his own certainties. The beam of his flashlight cut through the silent, still air of the emergency stairwell. And with every step, the contrast between the world he was leaving and the one he was returning to grew sharper. Up there, a kingdom. Down here, his life. He kept touching the business card in his pocket, the sharp, elegant corners a foreign object against the soft denim of his work pants. He pulled it out, the simple cream card looking absurd in his grimy, calloused hand. It was a passport to a place he'd only ever cleaned. The power was still out in his neighborhood. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs to his apartment, the familiar scent of home, Maya's strawberry shampoo and Mrs. Gable's lavender air freshener, a welcome anchor. He opened the door quietly. The living room had been transformed. A fortress of blankets and pillows was constructed around the coffee table, illuminated by the warm, flickering glow of a half-dozen candles. Inside, he could see his daughter, Mia, and their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, playing a card game. And then, Mrs. Gable was saying in a dramatic whisper, "The Goblin King demanded a single sock from every person in the village." Mia giggled, a sound that was pure magic to Cole. She hadn't been scared. She'd made it an adventure, a wave of love, so fierce it almost buckled his knees, washed over him. This was why. This little girl was the reason for every long shift, every aching muscle, every swallowed dream. "Dad!" Mia spotted him in the doorway and scrambled out of the fort, throwing her arms around his legs. "The lights went out. It was so cool." After he'd paid Mrs. Gable and tucked a sleepy Mia into bed, he sank into his worn armchair. He placed Meredith's business card on the small table beside him. Then, he carefully took out the leather journal she'd let him bring home. She'd said, "I want you to see the vision, not just the blueprints." The doubt came creeping back, cold and familiar. He picked up the journal. He needed to understand. He opened the book, its old pages whispering as they turned. It wasn't just schematics. It was filled with sketches, philosophical musings, and deeply personal observations. Cole's fingers stopped on a page detailing the plans for a community park at the center of the Etheria project. In the margin, in Oren's elegant script, was a note. A child's world must be bigger than the 4 walls of their apartment. We don't just owe them shelter, we owe them a horizon. A horizon. The word hit Cole like a physical blow. He thought of Mia, growing up in this tiny apartment. He was giving her shelter, yes, but a horizon. He saw it then. He understood Oren's vision because he was living the exact problem Oren had dedicated his final years to solving. As the first, pale light of dawn filtered through the window, a flicker from the lamp on the end table made him jump. A second flicker, and then a steady, warm glow filled the room. The power was back. Cole picked up his phone. It was just after 6 a.m. Too early, but he couldn't wait. He dialed the number Meredith had written on the card. She answered on the first ring. "Meredith Beaumont." "Miss Beaumont, it's Cole Walsh," he said. "I accept. Your offer, all of it." "Good," she said, a hint of a smile in her voice. "Be at my office at 9 a.m. My assistant, Clara, will meet you in the lobby. Your work begins today." At breakfast, he told Mia. He explained the new job, the chance to be a real engineer. Her eyes went wide, and then a brilliant smile spread across her face. "For real, Dad? You're going to be a builder?" Her pure joy washed away the last of his fear. Walking into the Beaumont Tower lobby at 8:55 a.m. was like stepping onto another planet. He wore his only suit, feeling stiff and foreign. Clara, Meredith's assistant, met him with a warm smile and escorted him to the high-speed elevators. On the 60th floor, Meredith handed him a new security pass and a tablet. "This has everything we have on the Etheria project," she said. "Start with the board's original rejection. I want you to know what we're up against." She led him to a clean, modern office with a breathtaking view of the city. On the desk was a framed photo of the community sketch from Oren's journal. He was still trying to absorb the reality of it when a cold voice cut through his reverie. "You have got to be kidding me." Preston Beaumont stood in the doorway, his face a mask of disbelief and contempt. "My mother actually gave you an office? On this floor?" Cole turned to face him, his hands clenching at his sides. "What exactly are you supposed to be doing here?" Preston sneered. "Polishing the furniture with a higher-grade wax?" "Your mother gave me a job to do," Cole said, his voice quiet but steady. "A job?" Preston laughed, a short, ugly sound. "She feels sorry for you. Don't get comfortable. You're a charity case, Janitor. You'll be gone in a month." Just then, Meredith appeared in the doorway behind her son. "Is there a problem, Preston?" "I just want to know what he's doing here." "Cole is here because he has a perspective this company desperately needs," Meredith said, her voice like ice. "A perspective you would do well to try and understand. Now, if you're finished harassing my new project coordinator, I suggest you go prepare for your marketing meeting." Preston's face tightened, but he left without another word. Meredith turned to Cole. She gestured to the tablet in his hands. "I want you to start with the zoning denials and the feasibility reports from the first attempt. I want to know every single roadblock they put in Oren's way." She walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "They thought his dream was a weakness. We're going to prove it was his greatest strength." She turned back to him, her eyes blazing with a fire he was just beginning to understand. "We're going to dismantle their objections, Cole, one by one." The next few days blurred into a marathon of caffeine and concentration. Cole's world shrank to the dimensions of the glowing tablet in front of him. He'd arrive before the sun came up and often leave long after the cleaning crews, his former colleagues, had finished their rounds. He learned the secret language of corporate finance, a dialect of shell corporations and opaque transactions designed to hide money in plain sight. He was a ghost, haunting the 60th floor. A man with a mission. One evening, he was hunched over printouts at their small kitchen table, when Mia sat down across from him with her math homework. "What are you doing, Dad?" she asked, peering at the complex diagrams he'd drawn. "It's a puzzle, sweetie," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. "A really, really hard one. I'm trying to find something that someone tried to hide a long time ago. Like treasure." Her eyes lit up. He managed to smile. "Sort of. The treasure is the truth." By the end of the week, he'd found the first loose thread. The official reason for the project's cancellation was insurmountable zoning restrictions and significant community opposition. He started digging. The Community Opposition Group was an organization called Citizens for a Better Parkside. He cross-referenced the name with city records. They had incorporated exactly 1 week before the Etheria project was publicly announced and had dissolved the day after it was officially canceled. They'd run a sophisticated media campaign with full-page ads in the city paper. Who pays for that? Then he found the geological report. It was the linchpin of the zoning denial. A respected firm had concluded the land had unstable bedrock, making Oren's design untenable and dangerous. It seemed definitive. But something about the report's language was off. It was vague, short on specific data points. It felt like a conclusion in search of evidence. His heart started pounding again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was the thrill of the hunt. He stood up and walked to Meredith's office. She was in a meeting but saw him in the doorway and excused herself, showing him he had her full attention. He laid out what he'd found, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. "The Community Opposition Group feels manufactured, and the geological report that killed the project, it's thin. It feels like they were told what to find." Meredith listened, her expression grim. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "I knew it," she whispered. "Oren was certain someone was sabotaging him from inside the board." He said it felt like every door he tried to open was being locked just before he got there. She looked at a name on Cole's timeline, a name that appeared in several of the key meetings. Lyndon Hayes. "Who's that?" Cole asked. "My father-in-law's old rival," Meredith explained, her voice hardening. "He was on the board back then. A ruthless developer who believed a skyline was only good for showcasing wealth. He wanted that parkside land for a block of luxury condominiums. He lost the vote to Orrin, and he never forgave him for it." Suddenly, it all clicked into place. This wasn't just corporate disagreement. It was a targeted assassination of a dream. Armed with a name, Cole dove into the company's digital financial archives, looking for a link between Hayes and Citizens for a Better Parkside, or the geology firm. But the trail went cold almost immediately. The records were a labyrinth of firewalls and offshore accounts. When he tried to access the deeper server files for the geological report, a new message appeared. "File corrupted. Access denied." He felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't an old forgotten crime. Someone had been here recently. Someone was still actively covering their tracks. He went back to Meredith, the frustration heavy in his voice. "It's a dead end. Someone scrubbed the servers. Anything connecting Hayes to the project is gone." She listened, her expression thoughtful. "Lyndon is an expert at hiding things in the digital world. He trusts lawyers and code to protect him." She looked at Cole, a new idea sparking in her eyes. But Orrin was different. He trusted paper and ink more than pixels. He believed that the truth, real truth, had weight. You could hold it in your hands. The words sparked a memory from his old life, the physical archive. A dusty, forgotten room in the sub-basement that everyone assumed just held old blueprints. No one in the digital age would ever think to search there. No one would think to scrub physical records. A slow smile spread across Cole's face. "Look where no one else would bother to," he said, echoing her earlier sentiment. "Exactly," she said. "Go get your hands dusty, Cole." He took the service elevator down, the familiar rumble, a comfort. He was leaving the sleek, sterile world of the 60th floor and descending into the building's guts, the place where secrets were kept. He was a janitor again, but this time, he wasn't there to clean up a mess. He was there to find one. The sub-basement archive was exactly as he remembered it, a cavern of concrete and steel shelves, smelling of old paper and decay. He switched on the bare overhead bulbs, their weak light illuminating rows upon rows of cardboard boxes and document binders, a library of forgotten deals and obsolete designs. It was the building's memory, and it was a place no one in the sleek, digital world 60 floors above ever visited. He started with the section labeled External Contractors, GH. For hours, he worked his way through dusty, brittle files, the silence of the basement broken only by the rustle of paper. His back ached, and dust clung to his clothes and hair. This was familiar territory, the kind of thankless physical work he was used to. But this time, it was different. He wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. He was digging for a foundation. He was beginning to think it was another dead end when his fingers brushed against a binder that was out of place. It was labeled Geotechnical Surveys, Parkside Division, but it had been shoved into a box marked HVAC Maintenance, Sector 4. It was a simple, careless error, the kind of thing an intern would do, thinking no one would ever look for it again. They were almost right. His heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm. He pulled the binder out and blew a decade of dust off the cover. He carried it over to a small, rickety table under one of the bare bulbs and opened it. Inside were the raw, handwritten field notes from the original survey. Page after page of soil density measurements, seismic readings, and core sample analyses. And right there, on the final page, was a summary, scrawled in a hasty script. Bedrock stable. No structural impediments found. Site is green for proposed construction. The opposite of the official report. A cold fury mixed with triumph washed over him. He flipped through the rest of the folder. A folded, yellowing piece of paper, thin as a leaf, fell out from between 2 pages of data. A carbon copy of an internal memo. 2. Dr. Alastair Grant, senior partner from R. Kennedy, junior geologist. Subject: grave concerns, Atheria project report. Alastor, I cannot in good conscience sign off on the final summary report for the Beaumont job. Our field data shows the Parkside land is unequivocally stable. The conclusion you have ordered me to co-author is a gross misrepresentation of our findings and constitutes professional misconduct. I understand the pressure from the priority client, but this is a step too far. I am lodging my official objection. It was the smoking gun, the voice of a good man trying to do the right thing. But there was more. Tucked inside the folded memo, as if for safekeeping, was one more document. An invoice, on the letterhead of a generic holding company Cole now recognized from his research as one of Lyndon Hayes's shells. It was for a $500,000 consulting fee, paid to Dr. Alastair Grant at Geo Solutions Incorporated. The date on the invoice was 1 day after the falsified report was submitted to the Beaumont board. Cole sank onto a dusty wooden stool, the faded documents trembling in his hands. This was it, the truth. The treasure. It wasn't just a puzzle piece. It was a weapon. A story of greed and betrayal, told on 3 pieces of paper. The cold, calculated sabotage of a dream. The casual destruction of a good man's reputation, all for a piece of land and a luxury condominium. He stood there in the dusty silence of the archive room, the binder in his hand. He was no longer Cole Walsh, janitor, or even Cole Walsh, project coordinator. In the dim light of that forgotten basement, he had become something else entirely. He was the guardian of Orrin Beaumont's legacy, and he was holding the key to its resurrection. He turned, leaving the darkness of the archive behind, and walked towards the service elevator. He was no longer just an investigator following a trail. He was now the keeper of a truth that could destroy one of the most powerful men in the city. He had descended with a hunch. He was ascending with a conviction and a responsibility that would change everything. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing him in for the long ride back to the 60th floor. The elevator doors opened onto the silent, polished world of the 60th floor. Cole walked through the empty reception area, the dusty binder clutched in his hand like a shield. The contrast was dizzying. Minutes ago, he was in the building's forgotten bowels, and now he was at its nerve center. Meredith's office door was ajar, a slice of warm light cutting into the hallway. She was inside, pacing by the window, a silhouette against the glittering city lights. She stopped when she saw him, her eyes immediately locking onto the binder. She knew. "You found it," she said. It wasn't a question. He walked to her desk and laid the 3 pieces of paper out on the polished surface. The raw data showing stable ground, the desperate memo from the junior geologist, and the damning invoice. He walked her through it, his voice steady, explaining the significance of each piece, the story of betrayal they told. She listened in absolute silence, her professional composure slowly giving way to a cold, focused fury. She picked up the junior geologist's memo, her fingers tracing the faded type. This was the proof she'd needed for 6 years, the tangible evidence of the treachery that had broken her husband's spirit. "So this is how they did it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is how they broke his heart." Then she straightened up, the strategist taking over, her grief hardening into resolve. "This changes everything. We are no longer on the defensive, trying to prove Orrin was right. We are now on the offensive, proving he was deliberately and maliciously wronged." She began to pace in front of the fireplace. "We can't just use these documents. Hayes would claim they're forgeries, tie us up in litigation for years." Her eyes narrowed as she looked back at the memo. "The key is the witness, R. Kennedy, the junior geologist. If he's alive, if he'll talk, he's the one thing Hayes can't spin." She stopped pacing and turned to Cole, a new, dangerous light in her eyes. She was giving him his next mission, one that was a world away from buffing floors or even coordinating projects. "I need you to find him," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Find Robert Kennedy. Find out where he is, what he's doing, and if, after all these years, he's still willing to tell the truth." Cole returned to his office, the weight of the new task settling on him. He sat at his desk, the city lights sprawling before him, and began the hunt. He started the only way he knew how, with a simple search: Robert Kennedy, geologist. The results were a digital blizzard of professors, consultants, and recent graduates, none of whom fit the profile. As he was scrolling through another dead end, a shadow fell across his doorway. It was Preston. "Still playing detective, Janitor?" he sneered. "Whatever you think you've found, you're just making trouble for my mother. She's emotional. You're taking advantage of her grief. Stay out of things you don't understand." Cole didn't even look up from his screen. "I have work to do, Preston." The quiet dismissal, the lack of fear in his voice, seemed to infuriate Preston more than any argument. "This is my world, my company. Don't you forget that." He stormed out. Cole ignored him. He was a gnat buzzing around a man on a mission. The hunt for a ghost had begun. He scrolled through page after page of dead ends. The man who had written the memo had vanished. The truth was in his hands, but the man who could give it a voice was nowhere to be found. The real search, he was beginning to realize, had only just started. For 2 days, Cole chased a ghost through the digital world and found nothing. Robert Kennedy had been effectively erased. Frustrated, Cole realized he was thinking like a man from the 60th floor. He needed to think like a janitor again, to look in the places no one else bothered to. He went back down to the sub-basement, not for project binders, but for the driest, most boring records imaginable: vendor accounting. In a dusty box for GeoSolutions Inc., he found it. Tucked into a folder of old invoices was a small, internal routing slip, a request to forward the final correspondence for an R. Kennedy to a new address. It wasn't in the city. It was in a small, remote town called Havenwood, nestled in the mountains 5 hours away. A quick online search gave him the next piece: a business listing for Havenwood Home and Foundation, a local contractor specializing in foundation repair. The owner, Rob Kennedy. The geologist who was forced to lie about foundations now made an honest living fixing them. It had to be him. He took his findings to Meredith. "He's hiding in plain sight," Cole said. Her expression was grim. "A man like that, a man who has run so far, won't respond well to a lawyer showing up at his door." She looked at Cole, her trust absolute. "He might respond to you." An hour later, Cole was in a rental car, driving north, the city shrinking in his rearview mirror. He had a motel room booked under an assumed name and a clean copy of a 6-year-old memo in a folder on the passenger seat. Havenwood was a postcard town, a place where people went to escape. Cole found a coffee shop across from Havenwood Home and Foundation, and waited. An hour later, a man in a flannel shirt and jeans emerged from the office. He had a tired but friendly face and laugh lines around his eyes. He paused to wave at a woman pushing a stroller before getting into a dusty pickup truck. This was Rob Kennedy. He didn't look like a man haunted by the past. He looked like a man who was finally at peace. This, Cole realized, was going to be much harder than he'd thought. He needed a way in. That evening, from his motel room, he made a call, posing as a potential home buyer named David Miller, who needed a foundation inspection. They agreed to meet the next morning at a vacant cottage on the edge of town. Kennedy was prompt, professional, and radiated a quiet integrity. For an hour, Cole followed him as he worked, watching him expertly diagnose the old cottage's structural issues. They were in the damp, musty crawl space when Kennedy delivered his verdict. "It's an old house," he said, his voice echoing in the enclosed space. "But it's got good bones. The foundation is solid." This was his chance. They were alone, surrounded by the damp, quiet earth. "A solid foundation is everything, isn't it?" Cole said casually. Must be a tough lesson to learn if you start out at a place that cuts corners. A place like Geo Solutions, for instance. The change was instantaneous. Kennedy froze, his head snapping up, his friendly demeanor vanishing. The air in the crawl space became thick and cold. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice flat and hard. He started to move towards the exit. "My name isn't David Miller," Cole said quickly, blocking his path. "It's Cole Walsh. I work for Meredith Beaumont Kennedy, stopped dead." The name he had been running from for 6 years had found him. "You need to leave," he said, his voice a choked whisper. "Right now." "I can't do that," Cole said gently. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded copy of the memo. He held it out. "I found this. Your words. They were the truth then, and they're the truth now." Kennedy stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. "6 years ago, you tried to stop them," Cole pressed on. "You tried to save Orrin Beaumont's dream. They silenced you, but Meredith knows everything now. She wants to build the Etheria project." "Good for her," Kennedy spat, his fear turning to a bitter anger. "It has nothing to do with me. That part of my life is over." "Is it?" Cole asked. "Orrin's dream was built on a lie. Meredith can't fix it without you. She needs the man who tried to tell the truth the first time around." Kennedy finally looked up from the memo, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. He looked at the stranger who had unearthed his buried life. He thought of his wife, his kids, the peaceful existence he had painstakingly built. "You have no idea what you're asking," he said, his voice shaking with the weight of it all. "You have no idea what a man like Lyndon Hayes is capable of." "I know what he's capable of," Cole said, his voice steady despite the tension that thrummed in the air. "I'm not asking you to do this for a company. I'm asking you to do it for Orrin Beaumont, and for every family that deserved a home in Etheria." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I have a daughter, Rob. I'm trying to build a better world for her. That's all Orrin was trying to do, too." The mention of his daughter seemed to land a blow. Kennedy looked away, his jaw tight. The fight went out of him, replaced by a deep, weary resignation. "Get out," he said, his voice ragged. "Just get out of here." Cole knew he could push no further. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card with the motel's name and his room number written on it. He placed it, along with a copy of the memo, on a ledge in the foundation wall. "I'm here until tomorrow night," he said quietly. "You're not alone in this, Rob. Not this time." He backed out of the crawl space, leaving Kennedy alone in the dark with his ghosts. The next 24 hours were the longest of Cole's life. He returned to his motel room and sat by the window, watching the slow, peaceful rhythm of the small town. He called Meredith. "I found him," he said. "He's scared. I've left it with him." "The choice has to be his now," she replied, her voice firm. "You did the right thing, Cole. Stay put." He called Mia next. Hearing her chatter about her school day was like a deep, calming breath. She was his North Star, the reason he was sitting in a lonely motel room 5 hours from home. He was starting to believe Kennedy wouldn't come. He had failed. Just after midnight, a soft knock came at his door. Cole's heart leaped into his throat. He looked through the peephole. It was Rob Kennedy. He opened the door and Kennedy slipped inside, looking haunted. "They destroyed me," he said, his voice raw with a pain that was still fresh. "After I sent that memo, my boss, Grant, called me into his office with Hayes' lawyer on speakerphone. They told me that if I ever spoke a word of this to anyone, they would erase me. They'd drown me in lawsuits until I was bankrupt, make sure my name was poison. It wasn't a threat, it was a business plan." He finally stopped pacing and looked at Cole. "I have a wife, 2 kids, a life here. Hayes will come after them. Meredith will protect you," Cole said with certainty. "Protection isn't enough," Kennedy said, shaking his head. He took a deep breath. "If I do this, if I agree to testify, it's not for money. I want a new life, a real one. She has to use her power to make my family disappear. New identities, a new home, somewhere so far away, Hayes and his poison can never touch us again. That's the price." It was an incredible demand, and it was the most reasonable thing Cole had ever heard. "She'll do it," Cole said without a moment's hesitation. He knew Meredith. She would move heaven and earth for the man who could vindicate her husband. A flicker of hope ignited in Kennedy's tired eyes. The two men, the janitor and the geologist, stood in the shabby motel room, allies forged in a shared sense of right and wrong. Kennedy reached into his own worn jacket. "If we're going to do this," he said, his voice now steady, hard as the bedrock he used to study, "we're going to do it right. We're not just going to expose him. We're going to burn him to the ground." He pulled out a small, cheap digital audio recorder. "After that meeting, I knew I was finished, but I wanted insurance. I called Grant back that night from a payphone, pretending I was ready to play ball. I recorded the entire call." He pressed the device into Cole's hand. "He admits everything. The falsified report, the payoff from Hayes, the threats, everything." Cole stared at the small black rectangle in his palm. It wasn't just a smoking gun. It was a confession. The hunt was over. Rob Kennedy was no longer a ghost. He was an army, and he had just handed Cole the battle plans. The drive back to the city was a 5-hour prayer. The small digital recorder sat on the passenger seat, a black plastic box holding a 6-year-old crime, a man's confession, and the entire future of the Etheria project. With every mile that brought him closer to the Beaumont Tower, the weight of it grew. He was no longer just a janitor or an investigator. He was a courier, carrying a stick of dynamite to the heart of an empire. He didn't go to the office. As instructed, he drove straight to Meredith's brownstone. The sun was just beginning to rise. When she opened the door this time, she was already dressed in a sharp, dark pantsuit, the CEO armor fully back in place. Her home, which had felt like a quiet study, now buzzed with a low, tense energy. It had become a war room. A man Cole had never seen before stood by the fireplace, a sleek leather briefcase at his feet. He was in his 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of expensive, predatory calm. "Cole, this is Julian Adler, our firm's general counsel," Meredith said by way of introduction. "Julian, this is Cole Walsh, the man I told you about." Adler looked Cole up and down, his expression a careful, professional blank. "I have his terms," Cole said to Meredith, ignoring the lawyer's scrutiny. "He'll testify, but he wants full protection for his family. New identities, relocation, a complete extraction from his old life." Meredith nodded. "Done. Julian is already working on it." "He also gave me this," Cole said. He held up the digital recorder. "It's a recorded confession from his old boss, Dr. Grant. It details everything: the falsified report, the payoff from a holding company owned by Lyndon Hayes, the threats to Kennedy's career." Adler's professional calm finally broke. His eyes widened slightly. "Are you serious?" Cole simply placed the recorder on the heavy oak table and pressed play. For the next 10 minutes, the only sound in the elegant, sunlit room was the tinny, disembodied voice of Dr. Alastair Grant, captured 6 years ago. His arrogant, dismissive tones filled the space, a poison seeping into the morning air. He bragged about the payoff. He casually described how they would ruin Kennedy's reputation. He named Lyndon Hayes as the client who had ordered it all. It was a cold, clinical confession of a crime committed with absolute impunity. When it finished, a heavy silence descended. Meredith stood by the window, her knuckles white as she gripped the window frame. Adler sank into a leather armchair, letting out a low whistle. "My God," Adler breathed. He looked at Cole with entirely new eyes. "That's not just a smoking gun. That's a signed, notarized confession delivered by a marching band. It's a kill shot." Meredith turned from the window, her face pale but her eyes blazing with a cold, hard fire. "The question is not what we have, Julian. It's how we use it." "We could take it to the district attorney," Adler began, shifting into legal mode. But Hayes has deep political connections. He could bog it down, claim it was an illegal recording. It could get messy. No, Meredith said firmly. I will not have Kennedy's name dragged through the mud. This will be handled internally. It will be swift, and it will be brutal. She looked at Cole. Cole, you brought us this. You understand the personal cost better than anyone. What do you think? He was taken aback. The powerful CEO and her top lawyer were asking him, the janitor, for his opinion. He thought of Rob Kennedy, a good man forced to live in fear. He thought of Orrin, his dream defiled. I think, he said, his voice steady, that Rob Kennedy put his family's life in our hands. We owe it to him to make sure this is decisive, that Hayes can never touch him again. And we owe it to Orrin to not just punish Hayes, but to finally build the project. Adler nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well said, Mr. Walsh. Then the plan is set, Meredith declared, her voice ringing with command. Julian, you will finalize the arrangements for the Kennedy family's relocation, and you will draw up the legal paperwork for the immediate removal of Lyndon Hayes from the board. Cole, you and I will prepare the presentation, every piece of evidence. She walked to her desk and picked up the phone. I am calling an emergency meeting of the board of directors for Friday morning. Attendance mandatory. She looked at the two of them, her team, her army. The air in the room crackled with purpose. The quiet investigation was over. The war was about to begin. For 6 years, Lyndon Hayes has built his reputation on the ruins of my husband's dream, Meredith said, her voice like steel. This week, we begin the foreclosure. The 2 days leading up to the board meeting were a blur of controlled chaos. Cole and Meredith worked side by side in her study, the war room, building their case. They were a seamless team, his grounded, methodical approach complementing her sharp, strategic mind. They ate takeout over piles of documents and planned the demolition of Lyndon Hayes' legacy, piece by damning piece. Friday morning, Cole put on his suit. It felt different this time. It wasn't a costume he was wearing to try and fit in. It was a uniform. He met Meredith and Julian in the lobby of the Beaumont Tower. The morning sun streamed through the massive windows, but the three of them stood in a silent, charged bubble of their own. An army of three. He's here, Julian said quietly, looking at his phone. Hayes just went up. Meredith took a deep, steadying breath and looked at Cole. A silent question passed between them. He gave a single, firm nod. He was ready. Let's go, she said. The elevator doors opened onto the 60th floor. The boardroom was a place of immense power, and today it felt like a courtroom. Lyndon Hayes sat near the head of the table, radiating a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He greeted Meredith with a smooth, disarming smile that didn't reach his eyes. Meredith, my dear, to what do we owe the pleasure of this last-minute drama? We're here to discuss the structural integrity of our foundations, Lyndon. Meredith replied, her voice cool as she took her seat at the head of the table. Once the doors were closed, she began. I've called this meeting because new information has come to light regarding a past project. Information that poses a significant, immediate threat to the integrity of this company. She turned slightly towards Cole. Mr. Walsh, if you would. Every eye in the room swiveled to the former janitor. Cole stood, his heart pounding, and began to speak. He didn't just present facts. He told the story of Orrin's dream. Then, he pivoted. The project was officially denied due to zoning restrictions and community opposition. He put a slide up on the large screen. The opposition was a shell group. The zoning denial was based on a fraudulent geological report. He laid out the evidence. The fake citizens group, the original field data showing the land was stable, the desperate memo from R. Kennedy. The mood in the room shifted from curiosity to shock. Hayes laughed, a dismissive, patronizing sound. Meredith, this is ancient history. You've dragged us all here to listen to the conspiracy theories of your new protégé? The point, Lyndon, Meredith said, her voice dangerously quiet, is corporate sabotage, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The point, she said, her eyes locking onto his, is you. She nodded once to Cole. Cole pressed a button on the tablet. There was a click, and then the sound of a voice filled the silent, stunned boardroom. It was the tinny, arrogant voice of Dr. Alastair Grant, confessing everything. Hayes wanted the land. The payoff was generous. Don't worry, kid, his name is Poison. As the recording played, Cole watched Lyndon Hayes unravel. The mask of charming condescension melted away, revealing the ugly reality beneath. His face went from pale to a blotchy, furious red. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute and damning. Hayes shot to his feet. "This is an outrage, an illegal recording. This janitor has manipulated a grieving widow." "The recording is admissible in a civil suit, Mr. Hayes," Julian Adler said, his voice cutting cleanly through the bluster, "as is the sworn testimony of Mr. Robert Kennedy, who is currently in a protected location. We have the bank records, we have the confession. The company faces catastrophic liability unless it acts decisively, right now." Hayes sank back into his chair, defeated. Meredith stood up, her posture radiating a power that was absolute. "I move for the immediate and permanent removal of Lyndon Hayes from the board of directors." She looked around the long table at the shocked faces. "All in favor?" One by one, the hands went up. It was unanimous. "The motion carries," Meredith announced. "Security will escort you out." Hayes stood, his face a mask of pure hatred. He pointed a trembling finger at Cole. "You," he hissed. "You think you've won? You've just made an enemy you can't possibly comprehend." He stormed from the room. With Hayes gone, Meredith addressed the stunned board. "The first step in restoring this company's integrity is to right the wrong that was done. The Etheria project is officially green-lit, effective immediately." That evening, Cole was home. The silence of his small apartment a stark contrast to the day's explosive events. The doorbell rang. It was Meredith, holding 2 large pizza boxes. "I thought a celebration was in order," she said, a small, almost shy smile on her face. "And I was told there was an A+ spelling test that deserved a reward." Mia's gasp of delight was all the invitation Meredith needed. They ate pizza sitting on the floor of the living room, building a new fort out of sofa cushions. As Mia chattered happily, Meredith turned to Cole. "The board held a second vote after you left," she said softly. "It's official. You're the new director of the Etheria project." She smiled, her eyes filled with a profound trust. "It's your responsibility now, Cole. Oren would have wanted it that way." Mia, having overheard, looked up from her pizza. "Did you solve the puzzle, Dad? Did you find the treasure?" Cole looked at his daughter, her face lit by the warm glow of the lamp. Then at Meredith, whose smile was the brightest thing in the room. His new life. His horizon. "Yeah, Mia bug," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "We solved it. If you're hearing this, it means you stayed to the very end. Thank you. That honestly means the world to me. I really hope you got something out of it. Maybe a new way of looking at things, a moment of peace, or just a good escape from the everyday. If you did, I'd genuinely love to hear about it in the comments. You see, we're on a mission here, to prove that deep, meaningful stories still have a place in this world. When you subscribe, it's like you're telling us, keep going. When you hit that like button, you're giving the story a little push so it can find the next person who might need it. Don't forget those notifications so you know when the next one is ready. From me to you, thank you for being here. Carry the best parts of this one with you.